Yodelee. That seemed like a while for y'all, but it's just been a few minutes for us. Gridiron 360. I'm Bill. I got Dave with me, and we are putting out our first fantasy football cast dealing with daily fantasy football. We love it. Now, you may, there's a lot of different fantasy sites that you can do daily fantasy on. You got your DraftKings out there, you got your FanDuels out there, you got your draft out there, you got the fantasy football draft, which I haven't dabbled in. That's new. I'm a FanDuel player. I like FanDuel the best. DraftKings, not so much. I guess you could say when I started playing daily fantasy about 4 years ago. 4 years ago, I started dabbling. 3 years started getting it. And understand, daily fantasy is fun. Don't get discouraged if you don't win a ton right out the gates. Nobody's perfect. Even to this day, after playing this many years, I lose more than I win. But you do get those moments where you get the big wins, and I've seen them as they've gone. As I've played more and more year after year, you start to definitely get smarter and play better. I say all that to say, DraftKings, when I played that, along with the FanDuel, did kind of both of them a few years back. I never was successful at DraftKings. It just started to frustrate me, and so I stick with FanDuel. It's fun. I also play Draft, which is actually owned by FanDuel, but it's a totally different game. Your FanDuel is you have a salary cap, and you fill your lineup with a quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, 3 receivers, 2 receivers. No, 3. I don't know why I'm getting mixed up. So quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 receivers, tight end, flex, kicker, defense. Okay? Draft is an every week redraft. You get into a room with 3 people, 5 people, 6 people, 10, however many, and you get slotted in a snake draft, and every week you draft, like you're drafting a season long at the beginning of the year. And so that's fun, too. I like to play that as well. Mm-hmm. I don't think you've dabbled a ton in that. We're going to kind of focus on the FanDuel, though, daily fantasy, where you do have a salary cap, and you have to build a lineup within that salary cap. First and foremost, a lot of folks out there say that when you're playing these, you play the cash games, which are usually, when you look in the bank of games, those are the ones that are usually the 50-50 games, the head-to-head games to build your bankroll, games where you have basically a 50-50 shot at winning, and that is there as, quote-unquote, your cash cow. Build your bankroll, and then play in the big tournaments to try to get those big wins, but you're building your bankroll with that. I got to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of those. Some people are, and if you are, no problem. I like to go right to the big tourneys. I like the tourneys. Now, I started out playing very little money. Obviously, as I get bigger, the more money, the higher price games you play in, which could be, they have 25-cent game, they have $1, $2, $5, $100. Obviously, the higher price games, the less of a pool that will be playing in that, and the more opportunity to win big if you have a good lineup. I will do that here and again throughout the year, but a lot of times I like to put in a lot of lineups. I'm not like one of those sharks that puts in a gajillion lineups. Money doesn't grow on trees for me. Maybe if you guys get this thing out there to your friends and more people start listening and we can make a little coin off of this, then maybe I'll do so. But I do play, $1, $2, $3, $5 games, and I'll play multiple of them. What I like, again, tournaments. the ones with the bigger player pools with the opportunity to have a bigger prize at the end. Now, one thing I do like every week and that I stick to is single entry games. This avoids people like the Sharks out there, and more power to them because they're smart and it's what they do, playing multiple lineups within one game. Single entry, you get one lineup to play with, even if it's the best fantasy football guru out there. They're only allowed one in that tournament, and it usually, it gives you a better opportunity to win. And I've had some really big wins from my perspective doing that. So, though I don't dabble in the cash games, I feel like those single entry games are a little bit of a how should I say this? Has a little bit more of a fence around it than the big tournament non-single entry, which I love playing in too for the opportunity for the big win. But again, those are ones where people can put in as many lineups as they want based on how much they want to spend. So I like to stick to those strategies. Now, some things you can do with DFS when you see a guy priced, I typically like to look at it and project based on his price. Is he going to be a minimum of 2 times the value in points? So I say that as if you have a guy that's priced at $5,000, is he going to get me 10 points minimum? Okay? So, if you can build a lineup based on that structure, a lot of times you will find success, that you can pick a guy that, just consistently can deliver at least 2 times of what he is valued at. It is a great way to look at it. And if you can maneuver the pieces correctly, you may not win the big one, but you usually will end up cashing out. Now, there is a kind of a point line where you can cash out every week. And in past years, it's been in the tournaments. We're sticking with tournaments in this conversation. It's usually been around that 125 point, 130 point mark. If you can reach that, usually you're cashing out. Now, we have had some blow up games this year from some players, and that's lifted that cash out level a little bit to 150, sometimes 175, and that makes it harder to get yourself in the cash out position. The other thing you got to look at is you got to have the random. If you want to win big or have a shot at like the top spot or the top 3, you've got to pick that guy that is just the random of the week. Doesn't have to be Byron Pringle McCringle from the Kansas City Chiefs like last week, but it may be a Jaron Brown for Seattle, who scored a touchdown or 2 a couple of weeks ago. You land that guy who's usually a lower priced guy and then are able to stack everywhere else with really good players. You are in great shape. The sad part about this is that, and they do have single game entries, which we like to play, and we could dive into if we don't get to today. We will as we move forward. Is that if you are watching these games and say it's the 1 o'clock slate, and say you're playing 1 p.m. only, or say you're playing the main slate, which is your 1 and your 4. If you get a situation like last week where and you didn't roster Matt Breida, and he comes out right off the first play from scrimmage and scores an 80-yard touchdown, and you don't have him on your roster, you may be out right then and there. That's the unfortunate part. It's not that you can't get back in it, but especially for a chance to win it all, not going to happen because the person that wins it all had him. So,
all that being said,
we love it. Again, I've said before, people that go out and spend money on the lottery, that is, completely random, completely chance. You have millions upon millions of people playing this. The highest, usually the Millionaire Maker every week, which is like a $9 entry, is one of the higher player pools, and it's like, 500,000 people in it or so, something like that. And understand, you have somewhat control over this. It's not just a quick pick with a bunch of random numbers. So that's why we, for those folks that like to gamble, for those folks that play the lottery, if you like football, and especially if you like fantasy football, go play daily. It's a lot of fun. And especially if you have a season-long fantasy, you're a season-long fantasy player, whether your team's good or more so if they're not doing so good, this can brighten your day.
Yeah, I can. And I'll say, just from my perspective, you are the pro. I am the virgin in this. This is my first year doing this. It's a lot of fun. I'm not a heavy gambler, so let me just kind of state that. Like, this isn't somebody that's got to be a total heavy gambler.
I go to Vegas and I spend $20 in the video poker while having a cocktail at the bar, and that's about the extent of it.
Yeah, and that's kind of, I guess, to me, the fun part of this is that it is. It's very, very reasonable. It's a little bit of fun, and I'll say, like, I'm up in my first couple of weeks, and not by a ton, but it does make the games more fun. But it is a kind of thing where you can also, with your strategies, if you're willing to play maybe 2 or 3 games in a weekend, you can take a lineup you're comfortable with and make a few tweaks. And if you did really well on your core, which we're going to talk a little bit about that, then you can win in all of them and win a little something. And if not, like, you feel more comfortable taking those contrarian or flyer picks because you're kind of padded in some other places. So it's kind of a neat, different way to look at how you're doing the sport and your fantasy. And truth be told, most people that play season-long fantasy, it's usually not for $5. Usually people are playing 50, 100, maybe even more. So it's the kind of thing where you can use that kind of money for a long time and play it every week and have some shots to do some fun stuff.
Yeah, and here's the other thing. If you are a season-long fantasy player, and you got like a week like this that you're going into, or let's say a week like last week that you're going into where you're facing a Christian McCaffrey, you don't have him, and you're facing him, and you know that it's probably going to hurt. You can go to daily fantasy and have him on your team.
Yep.
And you can play the that card. What's the word I'm looking for? That you can play your odds. What's the word I'm looking for? You can spread your eyes, play your. I don't know. It'll come to me later. Why is it that words flow out when I'm not on the mic, but when I'm on the mic, it's like, what am I looking for?
It's pressure,
You can
man.
hedge your bets. That's what I'm looking for. You can hedge your bets so that if you get crushed by McCaffrey in season long, but you played him in daily, then you're winning some money.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's good. So we're going to start out real quick about we're going into week 6 of the NFL, and I want, based on projected game script, because we have seen some things. We talked about some of the games from last week not going the way expected, but based on what we see and using that knowledge for projected game script, games you want to have guys in your daily fantasy lineup because the game script makes sense, or is more likely that it's a game where there's a potential for a lot of points, so you have a great opportunity to have a guy on one of the teams where there's a lot of points to get yourself in the running.
Yep.
So right off the bat, we have Thursday night football, the Giants and the Patriots. The game script wise, you're looking at probably the Patriots controlling this game, but it will be a little hard to predict. You load up on the Patriots, not the Giants, but you could look at if they get up big, then hypothetically they should be putting the ball on the ground, which means Sony Michel should do well. However, the Giants, for what it's worth, our run defense is better than our pass D. And, it's only a matter, one of the weeks you're going to have the 4 or 5 touchdown game at a Brady. This could be it. It's in Foxborough on Thursday night. So that's something to question. I'm going to jump right away from there because that's not an uber predictable game script. And even if it was, I don't know if it's going to be a ton of points. And if it is, it's going to be one-sided.
Right.
Okay?
Right. Mm-hmm.
But I do move down to the Texans and the Chiefs. What do you think of there? You got a defense in Kansas City, not so great. You got a defense in Houston, not so great. You got two offenses with quarterbacks and skill players, especially at the wide receiver position, that can get it done. So the thought process for a game like this is that there are going to be points on the board. No?
Yep. That's the expectation.
That's the expectation. So we say that to say, find guys, whether they're high end, low end, on the Texans and or the Chiefs to have in your lineup, because more than likely they'll put some points up for you. Okay. Another game, believe it or not, that I think the game script could work in the offense's favor is the Falcons-Cardinals.
Yep.
You got two garbage defenses, but there are some weapons on the offense that could put up some points. Yep. I don't know if it's going to be a high-scoring game. I think there will be some points on the board. I don't think it'll be a field goal matchup. Just
right.
The defenses haven't shown me anything that it would be. So therefore, guys on those teams are people to consider to have in your lineup. Now, one of the other things that I didn't mention in the strategy section is playing guys from the same team. Love the stack. I do, but you got to know how to stack. It's got to be quarterback, receiver, quarterback, tight end. Okay, not always. Very seldomly are you going to go a quarterback and the running back, or a quarterback or a wide receiver and the running back.
Yep.
You could go running back, tight end. That is not such a bad thing. You could go running back, kicker.
Yeah.
That's not such a bad thing. Okay, but you got to kind of predict. You don't want to eat out of your own. You don't want to feed off of your own guys with another guy on that team,
yep.
unless it's going to be complementary. Thus, the quarterback getting the ball to the receiver or the tight end. Stacks are fun. Stacks are great. You should stack in fantasy football. Okay, you don't always have to, but I like to.
Yep.
I at least have, half of my lineups on a weekly basis where I have some sort of stack between a quarterback and a receiver or tight end.
Right.
Okay, so stacking is good, just as long as you're doing it the right way.
Yep.
So let's jump back into some of the other games this week. Is there any other games you see, game script wise, that we could kind of predict points on the board, therefore translating points to your fantasy pick?
Yeah, I mean, one that's probably a little bit more on the, I would say, the fringe of, some of those games you just mentioned, but could be very close, is like a Lions-Packers game right now. They are two teams that, Lions tend to score but have to chase sometimes, and the Packers have been scoring lately. So it's a Lions team that could chase there. So I like that one. I'm kind of up in the air on this one. Tell me what you think of Niners-Rams.
Yeah, I mean, I'm concerned because I know the Niners put 30-something points on Cleveland. That's a good many points. Cleveland only put, 3 up. What we've been saying about the Rams and Goff. Brandon Cooks may not play. Gurley is, being used in a very limited capacity. The Niners' defense is, I think, better than a lot of people think. And we've talked about the Niners on the offensive side of the ball. Like, Garoppolo's been a great game manager, but they're pounding you on the ground. That slows it down. It's one that I'll have shares of people in it, but in terms of looking at it, like, this could be a game where the game script dictates points, so get involved, just like we said with Houston and Kansas City. I can't guarantee that with this game. Now, here's another thing that, as you're building these and looking at games with the game script, and maybe moving forward, we'll start to bring these into the fantasy conversation. Certainly we do it with the NFL preview and the NFL recap, and that's over-unders. Look, Vegas is scary. And spreads. Vegas is scary how close they are.
Yep.
Okay, and more times than not, they're right. So I say that to say, those games of the week that have the higher over-unders, you can kind of use that to your advantage. You know?
Yep.
That's a game that, okay, I need to have some guys involved in this game because Vegas thinks there's going to be points on the board, especially if there is a high over-under, but the spread is tight. Because that means both teams are getting it done. So, but in terms of Rams, Niners, again, I'll have people involved in, definitely from a fantasy perspective. But in terms of game script, is it ones that I think is really good plays? I'm not super positive on how that's going to turn out.
Yeah.
A couple other ones out there that, I agree with you. Lions Packers could be one of those games. The Saints and the Jags, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe something going on there. Saints are typically a team that puts up a lot of points. Jags have been getting it done through the air with Minshew and Chark. Fournette's been solid. But when I look at these two teams going into this game and thinking in the back of my head daily fantasy plays, because you have your higher price guys, mid-tier, lower price guys, there's a couple guys there in Kamara and in Fournette, Fournette's a little bit lower, actually reasonable, but Kamara obviously on the higher end that I'm probably more interested in, to be honest with you, out of these two teams. So from a run perspective, those are the guys I'm thinking about. But as I run through the rest of this slate, it's not as obvious for this week in some of the game script predictions. I mean, you could go in and predict all of them one by one, but just not to beat a dead horse. Those games, the Texans and the Chiefs and the Falcons and the Cardinals, from the offensive side of the ball, based on what those defenses are and how this game may play out, I think there's going to be some points in those games where you can have guys in your daily fantasy lineups that will produce.
Yeah, and this is kind of where this gets a little there becomes a little bit more strategy in this, and we're talking about game strategy. And I'll use one for example, like Jets, taking on the Cowboys. Feeling as Cowboys could get offensively, could get going in that game and score a lot of points. You have to understand what that's going to do to your players. But also on top of that, as people will say, like, oh, well, that could, if Cowboys say score a couple of defensive touchdowns like the Eagles did, does all of a sudden, Amari Cooper becomes irrelevant. And, so you got to pay attention to that. But the other big key to this is one-on-one matchups. And I'll go back to the Jags playing Kansas City. I believe that was week 1, right? And one of the things we talked about in not just our fantasy, but also in the NFL lead up to that was Jalen Ramsey's going to be dragging somebody around. And we believe that it was going to be Tyreek Hill. And in that game, unfortunately, Tyreek Hill got hurt, but Ramsey was holding him.
Yep.
And holding him down. And that's a guy that's a big fantasy producer. So you almost have to understand the matchups within the matchups. And again, like a simple example is the Philadelphia Eagles. Well, they're a decent defense, and certainly they've taken some injuries this year. Their secondary is very weak. So when you think about it, is there a player, and we'll use McLaren in that first game as an example, who is an unknown coming into the season? I wasn't talking about him, a rookie, but you had a guy that was matched up against the secondary. They actually, which was strange, they got the lead, but they were always throwing in that game and having to throw, and now all of a sudden that matchup looked a little prettier. As the season wore on, we have more knowledge of who the players are, but understanding who some of those one-on-one matchups are. You can be playing against a weak defense, but if the best receiver is going to get shadowed by a really talented guy in the secondary, what are you going to do? Do you have a Bucs team that is awful defensively from a point scoring and a passing defense standpoint, but they're very good against the run? Does that play against your matchup? So this is kind of where, when you start to get some of those contrarian standards, on there, you start to really kind of look at the game within the game, and that's what makes it fun, and it helps you kind of pick out those surprise guys you may want to look at. So again, while we're talking about what games look like what to us, within that, then we have to go back and okay, now if that game is going to score points, where do I think the points are going to go, though?
Correct.
And that's where this gets kind of fun, and it makes it really interesting.
Yeah, and you brought up a couple good things. First thing is the wide receiver cornerback matchup, and you can look at several outlets out there and find out who's going to be facing who. And I think, and with that, make your decision. Is it worth me paying up for this number one receiver? Because he's going to be strapped against a really good D-back and or the number one corner on that team. And, should I play him or should I not? Or should I still play someone on that team but not him? Maybe because he's going to have all the attention, a la DeAndre Hopkins. Will Fuller gets wide open, has one-on-one, and, Watson's going to go to somebody. And, so those are things you have to consider. And you also brought up another thing, contrarian. This is one of the harder parts of daily fantasy, okay? You may get that where you have DeAndre Hopkins against a really good corner and may even be double, triple covered. But and when you're playing daily fantasy, understand there's other people out there, hopefully people that are smart, that are thinking about these things too. So they may shy away from DeAndre Hopkins and play a Will Fuller moving forward. But maybe you go contrarian and say, you know what? I know he's against the number one guy, and I know Fuller's coming off a great week, but, I'm going to pay up for DeAndre anyways. People may shy away from it because of the great matchup, the great defender against him, the great defense. But there are times where that guy can beat it no matter what.
Yep.
And that's a tough thing to call, but it is something in daily fantasy that you have to consider, and if you can make that call, it can really pay off for you.
Yeah, and one area that we'll focus on a little bit later as we get into some of the things that we like coming into this week is, we talk about in regular fantasy season-wide, going that defensive matchup. This week is a very quirky week with that, and we're going to talk about why. And the simple fact is everybody could play the load-up guys that you want, but you've got a salary cap. So that salary cap's going to mean you're going to have to take one or two guys that are not going to be your high-level picks. So understanding those matchups and what they're going to do is going to help you with that. We're not saying you stay away from Christian McCaffrey because he costs so much, but you've got to be able to offset that somewhere else with somebody that's going to produce. And Bill brought up a very good point about the 2-to-1 strategy, what you pay versus the production you're going to get, and that's a very good way of looking at it.
Yep. So we're going to dive in to give you actual guys that we're looking at for our daily fantasy this week, and give you some suggestions. I don't want to say we may say they're must plays, but everything's a suggestion. And if you beat on us because we're wrong, I got a thick skin. I can take it. All that means is I know you're listening. And, well, if you're responding, that's even better. Even better. So, yes. So we will get into, first and foremost, what I wanted to do was talk about one running back and one receiver that are high-priced, that are must-plays in our mind this weekend. All right, so we'll start with high-priced running backs. Again, this is tournament play that we're talking about. We're using the FanDuel platform where you have a $60,000 salary cap, and you got to build everything within that. So the highest priced, sorry, let me interject. We're talking about the main slate too. So when you look at the tournament matchups, you go to one that says main, and those games include all the Sunday 1 o'clock and all the Sunday 4 o'clock games. Yep. No Thursday, no Sunday night, no Monday night. Okay?
Correct.
So it's all Sunday day games. And right now, the two highest priced receivers are Julio Jones at $8,500 and DeAndre Hopkins at $8,400. And then you have Michael Thomas at $8,200. Was I going running back first? I'm mixing it up.
We're doing running back receiver. We're top-end running back receiver.
We're going to go receiver because I started there. And then we'll hit you with the running back. So I know DeAndre Hopkins. Look, everybody that listens knows I'm a Clemson guy. DeAndre Hopkins, Deshaun Watson, Clemson guys. I know DeAndre Hopkins has way underperformed this year, but he's going to get right. And this is the perfect week for him to get right. It's a matchup where you expect points on the board. Again, we said it. This is one of the games that you want somebody to be involved in. The secondary for Kansas City is nothing to be afraid of. There's no cornerbacks there in terms of their number one cornerback who may be strapped to him that that DeAndre Hopkins can't handle. Even if they put multiple guys on him, I don't think it's something that he can't handle in this game, just because I don't think Kansas City's secondary and their defense overall is that great. I think that, hopefully they'll keep Deshaun upright, because that's what we need to happen for DeAndre Hopkins to have a good day.
Yep.
But again, I don't see anything from Kansas City's defense, even on the front, that wouldn't allow him to do that, I guess I should say.
Yeah, and understand that Will Fuller, after last week, is just opened the eyes of the other teams that we can't go one way.
Thank you.
So it's also going to create a little bit of a decision time for them. It's a pick your poison now for them, So that also helps us in this matchup.
And I know that Fuller got a lot, and he's got a great rapport with Deshaun, but don't get it twisted. Deshaun wants to put the ball in Nuke's hands as much as he can. Yep. He's, no matter what, he's always going to look at him first, and rightfully so. So if we're, and that's who we're going to go with in terms of if you're going to pay up for one of these high-end receivers this week, and based on the matchup, DeAndre Hopkins at 8,400 is the play for us this week. Now, based on that 2-to-1 strategy, he's got to throw up 17 points, basically minimum 16, 17 points. So
he's got to go 100 plus in a score, basically.
He does. But he could. I mean, last week versus Atlanta, he went only 7 receptions for 88 yards and didn't see the end zone and put up 12.3. Okay, not great, but if he saw the end zone, he would have hit that 2-for-1.
Yep.
Okay, so that's what I'm looking for in this from him. Let's shift gears to running backs. And one of the reasons we were just discussing, because, Michael Thomas, great play no matter what. But we mentioned it. If you're going to stack, you don't want to stack a receiver and a running back. And so the reason we shied away from Michael Thomas is because the high-priced running back of the week that we want to get after is going to be Mr. Alvin Kamara. Now, keep in mind, main slate. So, Christian McCaffrey, not on this slate, okay? They play on, Sunday morning. So that Sunday morning is not involved in this slate. It's the 1-4 games, okay?
Yep.
Christian McCaffrey is not on the slate. So right now on the main slate, they've got Ezekiel Elliott at 8,500. They've got Dalvin Cook at 8,200. Alvin Kamara at 7,900. Nick Chubb, 78. Mark Ingram, 7,500. Leonard Fournette, 7,300. So our high-priced running back of the week that we're leaning towards or going to go with is Kamara, okay? Jacksonville's defense, typically not a bad defense, better when Ramsey's in at full strength from a pass defense perspective. Their run defense, not so much, not as great. We saw last week Christian McCaffrey went crazy on him, not just on the ground, but also through the air. Who can do that? Alvin Kamara, okay? They use him just like that, on the ground, maybe even more through the air. And my prediction this week is that he is the high-priced running back on the FanDuel slate, if you are going to pay up, that you want to get your hands on. I think he could, easily have over 100 yards on the ground, maybe even close to 100 through the air, and easily put the ball in the end zone once or twice. Again, he's not the highest priced. Zeke is at 8,500. Now, he's 7,900, which isn't cheap. Again, you only have $10,000 or 60,000.
6,000.
60,000 total to play with,
total.
and you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 positions to fill. So that's a big chunk of your money. But that's why we're telling you, if you're going to spend up for one of these guys, these are the guys you want to get your hands on this week. And at 7,900, again, double up. That means he needs to put at least a 16 on the board to make it palatable. I think he could do that easily with his eyes closed. Hasn't done it a ton in FanDuel this year yet, but this is a week. I mean, last week he put up just a hair under 14 points against Tampa Bay. But again, Tampa Bay, especially going into last week, was the number 1 rush defense in the league.
Yep.
Okay, so, and they showed it. They held him out of the end zone. He only did 16 carries for 62 yards on the ground. Did have 6 for 42 through the air. Again, that is part of Kamara's game. This is a week, we haven't seen since they played Seattle at the end of September where he had, an incredible game going 16 for 69 in TD on the ground, 9 receptions for 92 through the air and a touchdown. That's a stat line I could see at least getting close to that this weekend for Kamara. So if you pay the $7,900 and he puts 20 plus over, well, it was worth it. You do hope, though. Okay, we talked about the tight end. You want to, especially in the seasonal, you want to make sure you have a good floor with something like that. When you are paying up for these higher end, your hope is that you get maybe 2.5, 3 times the value because you are spending up. So what you really want to see is the high-end guys get in the end zone 2 times.
Yep.
So in looking at this game, okay, Kamara, I think, could very easily get in the end zone 2 times. Looking at the game again, the Kansas City game with Houston, again, Deshaun could easily get the ball to Nuke 2 times in the end zone. He looks for him first every time. Okay, so that's kind of when as you go down the list, you need to at least get a score just about out of every guy. But when you're spending up for that number 1 in those slots, you really want to try to have a little more than that. You really are shooting for the high upside instead of the solid floor.
Yep.
Okay, so that's kind of where we're at on the running back high end that I would say play this week and the wide receiver. Now we're going to shift gears a little bit because if you do that, as Dave said, you have got to offset spending up for somebody like that with a lower priced guy. All right, so we want to look at some lower price guys in both the running back and wide receiver position that are a real value that could really bring it home for you this week. Okay, so low price players that you can get some value from this week to help offset some of, maybe taking a high price player like we just said, a Kamara or DeAndre Hopkins. And you said it, you really want them to be under $6,000. Really, in my mind, to be a value. If 6,000 is kind of the average, 6,500 is an average. You want them to be in that 5,000 to 6,000 range, under $6,000. So this is my lock of the week, bro. I have him in just about every lineup in the flex position at running back, and that will be Mr. Tevin Coleman. Came back last week after being on injury for several weeks. Don't get it twisted. He is the lead back in San Francisco, and this is a team that can run the football, okay? So Tevin Coleman last week actually led the team in carries with 16 attempts, and he got 97 yards and a touchdown, and that was him he didn't start the game. Breida did, and that was just working him back in, and he had a phenomenal game against the Cleveland defense, which we expect them to be going to ranked pretty much middle of the pack. They're not god awful. Tevin Coleman this week, if we look at the San Francisco backfield, okay, if we look at the San Francisco lineup altogether on FanDuel, you've got Matt Breida at $5,900. You got Raheem Mostert at $5,700. You got Jeff Wilson Jr. at $5,500. You got the receiver Deebo Samuel, $5,400. You got Marquise Goodwin, the other receiver, $5,200, and all the way down there at a mere $5,000 is Mr. Tevin Coleman. My friends, this is value. If he got 15.7, last week, just getting back into the role and going against a Rams team that hasn't been as stout against the rush that I think everybody expected. This screams value. You drop $5,000 on him, throw him in your flex or your RB2. You have money to play with. I have him all over the place for my benefit. Hopefully, too many people don't follow this, because then there'll be more than one that understand. But I can't be the only one out there seeing this. I don't know what's up with the pricing on FanDuel. He's back. He's not hurt. But to have him behind the three other backs, one of which didn't even get a touch last week, is beyond me. Screams value. Tevin Coleman, running back, San Francisco 49ers, $5,000. Put him in your RB2 or your flex. Lock it up. Put it on the board. I guarantee you, out of a low-end guy, again, 2 times the value, great for a lower-price guy, guaranteed he'll give you at least 10. I'm thinking he's going to benefit you even more than that and hit the 20-point mark, which is 4 times what you're paying for him. 4 times. And that can be done. He did it barely even, scratching the surface last week with 16 carries, still leading the backfield, and came out with a hair under 16 points.
Yeah, I mean, this is almost too good to be true, because here's the thing you always concern yourself with backs, lead backs coming off of injury is, and I'll use like the Melvin Gordon. There was talk of him coming back last week, and he didn't get any, or not last week, the week before, and he didn't get anything. Last week he got touches, but was very poor in his performance. This is a guy that came back and ran like a champ. He had a good day for a guy that hasn't been
He's the guy
in the
that
ice
they
tub.
picked. The guy they brought, that Shanahan knew when he was the backup to Devonta Freeman in Atlanta, and Shanahan was there. Now Shanahan, the head coach, bringing him over. Yeah, that game, that's what the guy they expected.
Yep, and so I'm with you on this one. I think this is kind of no-brainer. Just to give you an idea, he played a small part in the first game and then played the last week's game, and he's already averaging, his average is double what he's pricing right now. He's averaging over 11 points, and that's with a partial game and a full game.
Yes.
And obviously the better game being the one that he just came back from. So this just,
and he wasn't even getting all of it. And I don't expect him. I expect Breida, maybe a little Mostert-Wilson combo to get involved. But they're going, as he's coming back, they're going to give him more. And it'll be more than, I expect him to get maybe closer to the 20 mark this week.
Yeah, and think about it. You're paying for a guy to just maintain, and you've got the possibility of really a lead guy, a high upside. So this one is a play it kind of guy.
I mean, again, low price guy. So you get a guy like that. Yeah, we said between 5,000 and 6,000 is low price. I mean, he is on the low end of that.
Yep.
Everything underneath 5,000 in the 4,000 range are typically just like who?
Yep.
Oh, maybe, or just one of those randoms, which you do have to find. But this, I just don't see how it's not a slam dunk, and it allows you to have a lot more money, not just like 400 or 500 because you got a guy at 55, 56. You have an extra 1,000 to play with, and when you're building these lineups, $1,000 can be the difference between a DeAndre Hopkins and maybe have to go down to like a Tyler Lockett, who's not bad, but you see where we're going with that. Slam dunk. So let's talk about low priced wide receiver that is a great play this week. Hit me.
I love me some Larry Fitzgerald.
Lawrence Fitzhume?
That would be the man.
Oh, yeah. Give me a little feedback.
All right. He's currently priced at $5,600. So, again, right now, this is kind of a forgotten guy on a poor offense. So it's like, well, are you really sure? He doesn't have the burst. He is going against one of the worst defenses, if not the worst defense in the NFL. In the Atlanta Falcons. Understand, Christian Kirk is going to be out in this game, which in some, he's going to draw the tougher matchup. But the one thing that Larry hasn't lost is his ability to make the tough catches, and they will throw to him in coverage. I think Kyler Murray is going to have a little bit more ability to stay upright and to hold the ball a little longer, which is to the benefit of a guy like Larry Fitzgerald. And I mean, he right now is averaging more than double that in fantasy points as it is, and they've had some, not easy matchups so far, and this is by far the easiest matchup that they have had this year. I could see Larry doing something he struggled to do, which is get in the end zone.
This could be a week he could get in the end zone.
Yeah, and this is also,
he's done decent for his price in daily fantasy, just like you said, without getting in the end zone.
Right. So this has the potential to be big for them.
He's the most reliable target.
Yeah, and you think about this, his team is coming off a win, so, they're kind of figuring things out a little bit as best they can and getting a weak matchup in that standpoint. But also
get to go home.
Yep, and you're going to play a Falcons team that, while they're not good, has been able to put up points against weaker defenses, so this could be a little bit of a shootout. This just, to me, screams like it could kind of go up and down the field a little bit, and he would be the guy I see them targeting. He's been the guy that's been the safety net, and it's a chance for Kyler Murray to really up that rapport with him. So I love him at 5,600.
Yeah, you look at his targets thus far this year, from the first game to now, 13, 11, 7, 5, 8 consecutively. He's getting the looks. A lot of them aren't deep. I expect him to get about his average, like 8 to 10 receptions. He may not throw up 100 yards, but I think he'll throw up more than 50. Okay, so be somewhere between there, and I think he'll see the end zone at least once. And if he goes more than any of those numbers I just rattled off, well, it is absolute gravy train.
Ding ding ding
at
ding 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 ding
$5,600 to throw him in a wide receiver 3. And again, it leaves you more money. And the other thing, hopefully, because of my season long, I have David Johnson, and he has been almost more effective in the passing game than the run game for them, and so they will continue, but he's a little banged up. I don't expect him not to play, especially in this matchup, and I do expect him to have involvement, but he is banged up. And Kirk, probably not going to play. This is a great spot for Fitzgerald. I was trying to harken back because we're in Atlanta, and I believe I've seen him come to Atlanta and every time he's been here, get in the end zone. So, I don't hold me to it, but I wouldn't be surprised if that is true. This is something of again, great value. Great value. This is a guy that can see close to double-digit targets. He will lead the team in targets this week and probably lead the team in receptions because he is all reliable. And like we said, he's done very well. He's been very consistent. Nothing, the floor is modest, but the game script, the defense he's going against, the outlook of the other pieces on that offense, and just getting into the end zone with what he's been doing modestly, and he's created great value for you.
Yeah, what I really like about both these wide receivers and these running backs is if I was to take salary cap out of it, I like them, period.
Yeah.
I like them for just straight up fantasy value. And that, you're kind of trying to weigh positives and negatives when you get into the DFS part of it, but these are just good matchups, and I like them. Upside, a lot of reasons to think that they're going to get not only just above projection, but just do well. So that's what makes these really cool picks in my mind.
Yep. So, and what's great is we talked about, in particular, 2 games, the Houston-Kansas City game and the Atlanta-Arizona game, where you probably want to have someone involved. And we've just given you a high-end guy that you can get in the Houston-Kansas City game at wide receiver in DeAndre Hopkins. Yeah, you paid up for him, but here's a wide receiver you could pay up for in another, potentially good game, scripted game at the low end. So there's a balance right there. We've just given you 2. So that's great stuff. Great stuff. One quick thing I do want to touch on, because in FanDuel they do play defenses, is defensive strategies. And in daily fantasy, it's kind of hit or miss, but, a good day from your defense in FanDuel can mean, if you're close, can mean the difference between first place or 50th.
Yep.
Okay. So typically I like to play, man. I'm not one that typically goes up and spends for the top defense. Oftentimes you can do just fine. playing somebody, a lower price defense to save yourself some money if it's a good matchup, or you kind of look at the potential game script, or again, the over-unders. This week in particular, I'm looking down the slate, and there's nothing, again, you said it earlier, you got, okay, who's going against Arizona? Atlanta, not so great. Who's going against Miami? Washington, not so great. So it's like, this season thus far, the teams playing those bad teams, the defenses have done very well. But this week, I don't see many that stand out like that, except for one. And unfortunately, they are the highest priced defense on the slate, and that's Dallas playing the Jets. Now, yes, Sam Darnold's coming back, but Dallas does have a good defense. It might be a week where you do want to try to find a way to have those extra $500 to $700 that you may go on a lower defense to get up to the Dallas defense.
Yeah, just because you don't have any variety. Something else to keep an eye on, though, if you do get into that struggle where you're kind of running out of trying to figure out where to put that money. I think the next statistically game, there's Denver at Tennessee. Could be decent. One that I kind of like, it's a little bit tricky. And I'm not necessarily saying I'm going to play it, but just if you're kind of strapped for cash, may want to consider Seahawks Cleveland Browns. The one good thing that you've seen from the Seahawks standpoint is their ability to defend the pass. And you've seen a lot of the inability to effectively get the ball to the receivers, and they have had a lot of turnovers as Cleveland. So again, I'm with you on the Dallas idea. Yeah. I definitely am. But,
I hear what you're saying.
If you're finding a challenge, look, I think those are kind of your teams that you got to look at, because other than that, it's rough this week on defensive
and
standpoint.
If you look at the pricing, if Dallas is at the top at 5,000, at the bottom end is the Jets at 3,100. You just mentioned Seattle. They're 4,100, so they're kind of middle of the way. If you do have to go down lower, as I look at it on the defensive side, and you need to find a defense like on the cheap, the 49ers. Yep. I mean, their defense has been good. And the Rams, again, Gurley has been limited. Goff doesn't look that great.
And he is susceptible to turnovers.
Yeah, and the 49ers, I mean, I think it's kind of a slap in the face that they're this low. They're priced at 3,500. They're almost there at the bottom, and they've been very good on defense, holding things up. It says on the FanDuel, they're the second ranked pass defense. So
highest points per game in this for the main slate. So on average.
Yeah, so, that last week, San Francisco, or this past Monday, of course, it was the debacle that Dave spoke of with the Cleveland Browns. They threw a 19 up there, and then the 2 weeks prior, before their bye, they had a 7 and a 7. Not great, but if they're 3,500, well, there's double your value. First week against Tampa Bay, 27 points. So if you're looking for a lower ND, it's one to consider at 3,500.
Yeah, and then this is all going to play out. Listen, we're gonna give you kind of a base team to work with, but then it's where you make your moves outside of that, and this is where you kind of just go with what you love. Go with what you feel good about. It's a gut game, so you want to have that core to feel like, okay, I got something. I got a nice solid base to work off of. And so, you kind of want to see how that plays out to figure out what you're going to do defensively. But I do want to reiterate, I agree with you on this week in particular for defense. Not many weeks I'd pay up for top defense.
Correct.
Just with the matchups, this is probably one of those weeks.
Most juicy of all of them. Okay.
Great.
In terms, again, that defense, scoring, your defense pulling out a 15 as opposed to 5, that 10 points may make the difference if you're at like 170 and you need to get to 180 overall, and that could literally be the difference between first place and 50th, or even first in like 1,100th, depending on how big the tournament. It can make a difference.
Yep.
All right, so now we are going to wrap up the daily cast having some fun. We're going to build a lineup on FanDuel right here on air with you on the main slate, which It consists of the 1 o'clock games and the 4 o'clock games. No Thursday night, no Sunday night, no Monday night, and actually no Sunday morning. That game is out of it in London. So we're going to go ahead and build a lineup here on air on FanDuel. Full roster. And we're going to start this lineup with the 4 guys that we mentioned. So we will start with our running back 1 being Alvin Kamara at 7,900. We'll start with DeAndre Hopkins as a wide receiver 1 at 8,400. We will also put Larry Fitzgerald in as our low price players with a great opportunity at 5,600. And as I said, my slam dunk, who I actually dropped in the flex, you could put him in the other running back spot, was Tevin Coleman at 5,000. Yes?
Agreed.
All righty. So, as I look through, that leaves us 1 running back and or flex, depending on where you drop Coleman, 1 receiver, 1 tight end, 1 quarterback, and the defense. Now, we did say Dallas was the defense to play, so if you can spend up, then at the 5,000, then do that. But we also gave you a couple other defenses in Seattle, which was middle of the pack at 4,100, and San Francisco on the low end at 3,500 that are viable potential plays based on how everything shakes out. So we will start at the quarterback position,
which we determined, and this is up to all of you, but we determined was the next position to look at for overall value. And what we'll kind of start with is the fact that there is an offensive showdown that is gonna, or at least what appears to be an offensive showdown that appears to be happening is going to be Kansas City and Houston going head to head. We said it in our initial fantasy cast that we believe that these were the 2 best quarterbacks from a fantasy perspective, top end, and now they're going to go nose to nose against 2 middling to poor defenses.
Yes.
So this is going to be kind of where it all this should be fun. This to me kind of reminds me of, was it last year Kansas City and the Rams where everybody said it was going to be an offensive showdown and it was like 56 to like 48.
Yeah.
This to me is kind of this game this year is what this will look like. And I'll tell you, it'll probably be 10-3, but whatever.
Hopefully not, because then we've just screwed everybody listening.
Yeah, you lost if that happens.
Yes. So, we look at this, so the 2 quarterbacks, you got Mahomes, you got Watson. Mahomes is priced at 9,200. Watson's priced at 8,400. Yes, Ty Hill will probably be back this week. Mahomes supposed to be good to go, but is a little gimpy. Watson coming off a great week. What I do know of Deshaun is he's a gamer, and I'm sure going into this as well as during the game, he's going to look at Mahomes on the other side of the ball, and he's going to want to out-duel him.
Yep.
Not just that, but again, you're talking about a $800 difference, and I said it before. I mean, $1,000, $800 just shy of that. This is good. It's a good bit of money, chunk of change you could save.
Yep.
So we've agreed that we will take Deshaun Watson in the quarterback slot at 8,400.
And just some logic into this. You mentioned obviously there's an $800 swing between their price, so you got that. So you kind of start playing it's kind of how you decide whether you want to stay with somebody or not, right? You do the positives and the negatives. On top of that, you've got an ankle injury to Mahomes. Okay, Mahomes is not the better runner. So we kind of started checking the boxes, and we believe that all in all, fantasy, they're both strong plays. But this is what kind of swayed us. Now, that's our logic. Some people might say that the home field advantage for KC is worth more. Mm-hmm. These are kind of things where you start just chopping up the little itty bits. But either way, we felt that those were the 2 strongest plays, and we let those tiebreakers bring us to Deshaun.
And the other thing that we really were looking at as we were considering this, if we have DeAndre Hopkins in there as our wide receiver 1.
Very good point.
And we're going to bring Deshaun in, then we have a stack. And that, I said, I do like stacks, especially if it's quarterback, wide receiver, and the number 1 wide receiver on that team as well. This is a good stack to play this week.
Yep.
So now we will move on. In doing that, now we've got Watson, Kamara, DeAndre Hopkins, Larry Fitzgerald, Tevin Coleman. That leaves us with $24,700 to play with. So which position do you want to jump at next?
Well, here's kind of where it started getting interesting. So what we kind of did is we pulled this off. Obviously, we went with a high-end player and a high-cost player in Deshaun Watson, who right now is almost tripling his fantasy over his dollars spent. So that's a good start right there. And this is where we kind of tinkered and we went a little bit back and forth on what we were going to do. So we started talking about tight end. And, we kind of looked at that, and my initial pull on this one was Austin Hooper. Before I always throw in a lineup kind of on my gut real fast. I don't spend a lot of time on it. I go real fast. But I had those 4 guys that we meant as our core already in my lineup. So from there, we kind of just going, okay, what do we feel the strongest about? And that's where we got to the quarterback. Well, here's where we kind of start to go, all right, we're going to need to mix and match because we just took a huge chunk out of our salary cap. And so we started looking at it. I had some running backs in there. I actually had Adrian Peterson as a potential because he would be a really low-end running back that would let me spend money elsewhere. But we ended up going to tight end and looking at Austin Hooper. And if you look at if you look at the tight ends right now, really out of the side of the top 6, you start to, and even in the bottom part of that 6, you start to have questions and you need certain things to happen for it to play well. We just feel like the Austin Hooper matchup was a strong matchup going against Arizona. Again, I mentioned this in our previous fantasy cast. I like Austin Hooper more because of what Atlanta's doing offensively, as opposed to the fact that he's playing the worst defense against tight ends. Matt Ryan is struggling to see the ball down the field. The reason why, as an example, we didn't look at Julio Jones as the number 1 receiver in this. Right. So Austin Hooper's been catching a lot of stuff over the middle and the intermediate routes, and he seems to be becoming more and more of a target, especially with them being behind, not being able to run the ball. So it just kind of led to a good mix here. Yeah, and I believe Hooper's going to put up points.
Yeah, like Hooper, we want him to see the end zone. He saw the end zone twice in the thus far midway in one game. So we want him to see the end zone. But this is the time to do it. Arizona is the team that gives it up to the tight end. He is on the higher end price guys. You see some big names, like you said, George Kittle, only $100 more. Mark Andrews is $100 less. Will Disley is $400 less. But we talked about it at the beginning of this conversation. Two matchups we thought would game script out to be more points, thus resulting in more opportunity for your guys to score points. The Falcons game was one of them. And if anything, everybody's been looking at Arizona as choking against the tight end. Hooper's been the guy without going against a defense that gives it up the tight end. He's been getting it done. So we will go with Mr. Hooper at 6,400.
And understand, this lineup we're about to give you is even going to give you the flexibility. So just think about this, to go out and get a George Kittle. Okay. Yep. So, that is not a weak play. I would feel comfortable with either one, but this is where you figure out how much flexibility and what you do to choose. So just a little nugget. So if you kind of feel a little contrarian to us, you got some good options out there.
And to play off of what you just said, we're going to leave you a little flexibility in this lineup, probably with a few $100 still left over, that you can do that and you make your own decision. Know this. You do not need to spend every red cent, okay? Do you want to leave $1,000 or more on the table? Probably not.
Yep.
But if you leave anywhere from $200 to $400 on the table, if you like it, go with your gut.
Yep.
One of the things that, I've found myself doing in the past to my detriment is building a lineup. And then come Sunday morning, I start to tinker with it, or I start to listen to a couple of these fantasy shows, maybe move some things around. At the end of the day, I'm like, dang gummit, I should have went with my gut.
Absolutely.
You should go with your gut. The only reason you might tinker last minute is if you find out a guy is hurt, not playing, or some kind of big news or headline comes up that could affect that player you've already got in there, or somebody that plays alongside of him, or who they're going against, what have you.
Yep.
Okay, follow?
Absolutely.
All right, so now that we've done that, it leaves us $18,300 left to play with. So let's go on to our our next wide receiver and drop him in.
Yeah, and okay, understand now where we're at this point. This we're kind of walking you through our logic as we went through and created this lineup. So now what we're left with is a running back start again because we played Tevin Coleman in the flex position. We're left with a running back, a wide receiver, and a defense. So this is kind of where we had to look at all three of these positions together, like kind of flipping between them to see. Again, you go back to who do we really like in this, because we're going to have to trade off somewhere else with the amount of money that we have left.
Right.
So just understand that's kind of we're juggling, because what you really want to get it to is you don't want to be juggling all 9 positions. You want to be juggling two, three.
Yeah.
If you're doing 4, you're getting on the borderline of really scary.
Yep. So, we have 18-3 left to play with, 6,100 a position. We spoke about it before. The top defense, which was Dallas, is $5,000. So if you did take them, then that ups your average per position player. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, but we had to play with it a little bit. So I say that to say for this next wide receiver, because we have a high-end guy, we have a low-end guy, we started looking in the middle of the pack in that mid-6,000 range to see if there was somebody that we really liked. Okay? We kind of landed between about 3 to 4 guys, okay? And they were all priced at either $6,400 or one at $6,300. On the low end at $6,300, you have Tyler Lockett with Seattle against Cleveland. Above him, you have Terry McLaurin. I'm sorry, 3 guys. Above him, you have Terry McLaurin at $6,400 for Washington, but they're playing Miami. Okay, so and thus far, McLaurin has put up 21 points, 14.7, 16 points, and 6.6 consecutively. I'll roll through his receptions and targets. 5 receptions on 7 targets, 5 receptions on 9 targets, 6 receptions on 8 targets, 3 receptions on 7 targets consecutively. So what that tells you is he's hitting around 7, 8, 9 targets no matter what a game. The bigger thing that we were looking at in this is the games, who they've played in those games. Well, the first one was against Philly, pretty good D. The next one was against Dallas, pretty good D. The next one was against the Bears, could be the best D. The last one against New England, pretty good D. And now they have Miami, who's a terrible D.
Yep.
So if he's been able to be productive against those defenses, then against a bad defense, he may be somebody really to consider. And I am very high on McLaurin this weekend. I do have shares in some daily lineups already. But for the sake of the lineup we're building, we are going to move on to the third of the 3. I said 4, I meant 3. And that is Mr. Tyler Boyd for Cincinnati at 6,400. Why did we pick that, Dave?
All right, so this is kind of where the little pieces of information that you can find. So kind of first thing I saw earlier is, John Ross is out.
Mm-hmm.
And so you got that issue. You've got a Baltimore D that Baltimore D that last week gave up 7 and 75 and a touchdown to Juju Smith-Schuster, who's not really been performing anywhere near where everybody was hoping he would perform. So you think traditionally a tough defense, but not doing particularly well against the pass and giving that up.
And then the week before that,
yep,
Jarvis Landry went in there and had 10 targets, 8 receptions for 167 yards. You see where we're headed?
Yep.
This vaunted Baltimore defense, which I still think is good, and maybe even good at home, is not as scary as they once were. It's not one that you think, okay, this guy is going to be completely taken out of the game.
Yeah. So really, what the final swing of the hammer, and this was the biggest swing of the hammer, was, and Bill mentioned it, looking at McLaren, and we were really considering him, was looking at his targets per game, because I was kind of questioning, do they have a new quarterback? And he brought those stats to me, and they were good. They were good ideas. But then we went and looked at Tyler Boyd, and he has had 10-plus targets 4 out of 5 games, 12, 10, 11, had 6 against Pittsburgh, and then 14 against Arizona. Now here's the thing is he may not get in the end zone. He's only had 1 touchdown, but he had in his last game 10 for 123 and 1 touchdown. So when we added that all together, again, these are guys that you need to produce. You don't necessarily, it's a bonus if they blow it up for you. And let me just say his stat line against Arizona will be blowing it up for them. But we need him to maintain and to do at least double over his points. And it just looks like right now he has that best opportunity. Some of the challenges, as we mentioned with like McLaren, what happens if Miami's the dumpster fire, the worst dumpster fire, and they run the ball? Then you get McLaren potentially out of the game. We even looked at Lockett going in and playing. He actually gets a lot less targets. Now he's the focal point of that offense, but he's going against Cleveland. And it's like, well, you know what? Unfortunately, sometimes Cleveland shows up a little bit defensively. And it's like, so how does that play? Plus, Seattle has to go all the way across the country and play in the Eastern time zone. I mean, we kind of factored in all these things. No, I am. Statistics have shown, particularly West Coast teams coming east, but overall, traveling across time zones, it's a challenge, and it's not very consistent, the scoring that you see out of these players. So I don't know. We had to talk it through, and it took us a few minutes, and then all of a sudden, you know what? We're like, we like it. All right, so we knocked Tyler Boyd off, or put him on our list, and knocked everybody else off.
Yeah, I mean Boyd, and understand he's the lead guy there, and with Ross gone, there's not much else. I mean, Eifert is there, but again, I see C.J. Uzama out snapping him. Now, Eifert might get more looks than Uzama when he's in there, but the past 2 weeks he's dropped balls in the end zone that have been in his hands. Typically been better than that, but, it's just we're looking for consistency there, and I just don't know that you're going to get it. And then, you have Auden Tate. I know he's a Florida State boy, but,
he's a couple catches, but he gets the touchdown here and there, and that's kind of where he's at in the offense.
Correct.
It's more feast or famine with that type of play. And right now in these roles, again, you need to get that double over minimum, and who gives you the best shot to do it.
And on top of that, then you look at Lockett in Seattle. Well, DK Metcalf has been a producing receiver there.
Yep.
And Will Dissly at tight end has been producing, and they are the running team. Now, last week they got a little bit off of that, but notoriously, and last year, and even going in this year, they're a team that runs the ball more than they do pass. Maybe not a lot more, but they keep it at, if anything, balanced more times than not. So, whereas Cincinnati, they're not very good. My only concern is the offensive line for Cincinnati, and that causing trouble for Andy Dalton. But even still, like that, then he's going to go to his first read, and that is Tyler Boyd.
Yep.
Okay, so we put Tyler Boyd in there. That now leaves us $11,900, $59.50 a player to fill a defense and a running back. Okay, so let's go. We said the top defense is Dallas at $5,000, but we discussed this ahead of time.
Yep.
And we were looking at the running backs that affords us with the leftover money, because if we spend the $5,000 on them, that leaves us $6,900 at the running back position. And so you have David Johnson at $6,900, and then it goes down to Le'Veon Bell, Derrick Henry, Lindsey, Devonta Freeman. And I like David Johnson, even though he's a little banged up. But we did discuss the stack of, you don't want to eat out of off your own plate with the two guys. We already put Fitzgerald in, and we wanted to shy away from David Johnson for the mere fact that they're going to be feeding from the same trough. Okay, so we looked at that and we're like, anyone below that is we're a little questioning. No one that really stood out to us.
Yep.
Therefore, we did come off the Dallas defense a little bit and went all the way to the other side on the low end of one of the defenses we gave you, which was San Francisco against the Rams. Okay, San Francisco's defense right now has played very well. And again, Gurley has been limited. Goff doesn't look great. Okay, so if San Francisco takes one of those options away on the defense, the other option isn't supremely scary.
Yep.
Okay, to me. And I think there's a lot of opportunities, especially with what I saw of Nick Bosa, to get some sacks, maybe some turnovers.
Yep.
Okay. And so there might be an opportunity for San Francisco. And, bottom line is this. They're $3,500, so it's on the low end. So we dropped San Francisco in there. That leaves us $8,400. Now we have opened up from above David Johnson at 6,100. Gurley at 7,100. Just stay away from that. Chris Carson, 7,200. Like it. Leonard Fournette, 7,300. Like it. Mark Ingram, 7,500. Yes, he's touchdown dependent. Playing Cincinnati.
Yep.
Good opportunity there. Nick Chubb, 7,800. Like it. Dalvin Cook, 8,200. Like it. It is the Philly D, which is a really good rush D, but we like it. And then the only other back out there is Zeke at 8,500, which is out of our price range. Where did we go, my friend?
All right. We went with the Florida State boy, Dalvin Cook. Here's what it comes down to. They've played some tougher teams. Dalvin Cook has gone for over 110 yards per game, 4 out of 5 games. Not on top of that, that's without any of his pass catching, which he's done a big chunk of those. He right now is averaging almost triple his value in fantasy points.
He's scored 5 touchdowns.
Yep.
2 in 1 week, 1, and 0 last week, surprisingly, against the Giants, even though he did have 21 carries for 132 yards, 6 receptions for 86 yards. And keep in mind, those 6 receptions, they were on 6 targets. The guy can catch the ball.
Absolutely.
Okay, but what I'm saying is even without scoring last week, he's averaging a touchdown a game thus far this season.
And just so you understand, in this discussion about the defenses, we discussed 3 different defenses who are on 3 different tiers of pricing. Obviously, we talked about Dallas. A middle game we discussed was Seattle going out to play Cleveland. Mm-hmm. The idea that Cleveland could be a potential for a lot of turnovers. Again, I always struggle with that coming across the pond kind of thing, but also, there has been a decent game here and there from the offense to the point where they could put up some points. But if we had gone that route, we had to then choose between Mark Ingram, we were on, Leonard Fournette, and Chris Carson. So you start to weigh the pros and cons of if I take them but only get them, and we just felt like the value for Dalvin Cook versus the loss potential for the defense going below Dallas or even Seattle. And we were kind of thinking almost Seattle may not have even been the best game over the Rams, and yet they were significantly cheaper from a defensive standpoint.
Right.
So this is kind of where you're going to play the game. And this is, and let me kind of wrap that point up with one little other thing. This is where you might play, like, for example, I'm playing the single entries that Bill mentioned on the main slate. I might adjust from roster to roster these last couple of picks we talked about
could go with
to hedge our bets.
D and drop down to David Johnson, or you could go with the Fournette or the Carson. You can make these different plays. Put Lockett in, and then maybe go Fournette, so you don't have both those guys. Or try McLaurin out and go down to Chris Carson. And you're able to play with them. We started you with a good base to play with that we think are going to be beneficial and score you points.
Yeah, and have fun with this. Believe in it. Don't live off somebody else. We've made that call a few times, and there's some really good people that know what they're doing. And we played one last week, one of our favorite guys, but I won't mention it because I don't want it to come across like it's a knock on him.
No, because I do love him.
Yeah, but it blew up on us.
Yeah,
and that's the choice we make. But it's not his fault. And if you look at him over time, he does this for profession, so he obviously knows what the heck he's doing. He makes a ton of money off of it.
Correct.
But it's that feeling. So if you feel a different core four, what you really want to take out of this is how do we begin to construct this concept and the idea of having to have some sort of average costing and this like Telvin Coleman pick, how that could really explode your day for the value that you're playing because you're allowed to play all these other guys.
Options with everybody else with your money.
Yep. So That's what we like. That's what we saw as a team. We're both going to play it on at least one of our lineups this week.
Yep.
And then we're going to come back and tell each other why we're both idiots. No,
or
just
we're going to
kidding.
come back and say, okay, so we can't do that anymore because you took half of it and I took half. I want all of it. I want all of it.
No more talking.
That's right. That's right. All right. So I hope you enjoyed this, and we will continue this. I really enjoy this a lot, and it's an integral part to what fantasy football is. And so go out there, get some lineups in, have fun playing and watching, win some money. Hopefully, win some money off what you learned here.
As we go along. I've been in a cave for 40 days, only a spark to light my way. I wanna give out, I wanna give in. This is our crime, this is our sin, but I still believe